What is up, everyone? Johnny Law here, and I implore you, don't you dare settle for fine. Better than that. But more importantly, don't you dare play a stupid character like an idiot. Welcome to Roll for Narrative. So before I get into what I'm getting at, I just want to make a caveat, a disclaimer, if you will. Don't show up to a table with a broken character. And I don't mean broken in an OP case. I mean, don't do that either, but sometimes it happens, and Jam will figure it out, right? What I'm saying is, don't make a wizard with 7 intelligence. Don't make a barbarian that hits like a wet noodle. It just doesn't make sense. It's just you're not only shooting yourself in the foot, but you're hamstringing the whole table by having a 1/5 of a player there instead of a full character. Now, sometimes if you roll for stats, they don't work out so well. That's alright, and you just have to deal with the hand you're dealt. You might want to play a character that's not perfect. That is totally fine as well. But don't do it in the stats. Do it in their flaws. Make them have something about them that just doesn't work well, or you have to work around. Have something a little bit weird about them that doesn't work out. I'm going to talk about a character of mine named Kaz, who's a Conquest Paladin in 5e. And he's got several flaws, to be honest. And it's fun. It makes it work for the game. It makes the game more interesting. It makes the role-playing more interesting. That's cool. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying if you're making bad decisions in building your character, it's going to affect not only your play, but everyone else at the table, and no one's going to have fun. So challenge yourself in other ways. Now that that's out of the way, what am I getting at? So I want to talk about playing dumb characters intelligently. I love playing low smart characters, and not because I like being dumb. It's far from that. It's more just that I tend to put my stats elsewhere than their intelligence.
So dumb, 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 so dumb.
In 5e, it's interesting because you have intelligence being more book knowledge, wisdom being just that, like worldly knowledge, and charisma being social knowledge. In the other system I play, OSR Plus, we don't have that. Instead, we have mighty, deft, and smart. Now, mighty isn't just brute strength, but it's also your fortitude, it's your willpower. In fact, one of the casting classes, the Psychic, uses mighty as their main stat. There's a whole psionics is based off of mighty. And deft isn't just, agility or being lithe. It's part of wisdom, and it's also charisma wrapped in there as well. It's just being able to be adept in the world and at large. And then finally, smart is just that. Smart is definitely leaning into book knowledge. It's definitely where the sorcerers and mages get their power from. And so that does still hold up true. And the skills based off it are all based on things that are inherently learned and not just a talent that you have. So that all being said, when playing a character that's lacking in one of these stats, you don't have to necessarily penalize yourself as a player. Personally, I love puzzles. I do the crossword every day. I just love figuring out that kind of stuff. And so when I'm in a game and I'm not playing a character that you would think would be good at those kind of things, you gotta find workarounds. You gotta find ways through either the RP or just the way that you present the character that allows you to get away with a little bit extra. So I'm gonna give you a couple examples. So the first approach I'll give you is what I call obliviously smart. And what that is, I'll use a character named Silver Talon, Sylv for short, who was in this campaign that was very Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, the Mummy, like that kind of aspect. We're in the desert. It's called the Dune Sea. And so there's lots of puzzles. There's lots of stuff we have to do. And one of the puzzles, spoilers for Fifth Element, if you haven't seen that movie, that's been out for almost 3 decades. At the end, there's a little bit of a puzzle they have to do where they're introducing these different elements. So you drizzle, you cry or sweat, drizzle water, and it opens up the water part, and then you light up on fire, blah, 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 blah. So my character in Frustration, Sylv, who is a daemon, which is basically like a giant gargoyle, big wings, he started flapping those wings in frustration of come on, let's figure this out. And in that way, he activated the wind one. Didn't know what he was doing. I knew what he was doing, but I'm not there. I'm hanging out above, shooting the shots, but I didn't want to come out and be like him figuring out, because he's really dumb. He's one smart. He's not his thing. So that's one way you could do it. In conjunction with that, you could also not connect the dots. You could lay out all the dots as a player in character. You could say, well, there's this, but I don't get it. And then one of the smarter characters can jump in and fill that out for you. Another Example will be a character of mine called Mr. Lone, who's a big brutish Tarth, and Tarth are these like Minotaur race, and they're known for not being agile. They have a disadvantage on all deft things, but he in particular, he was all strength, and then middling if not below on his deft and his smart. And so with him, the way I approach it is he just wasn't book smart. He's been around the world. He was an ex-criminal. He left at home at a young age, but he was just not really well read. He was not subtle at all, and he got frustrated very easily. On the battlefield, he's a brilliant tactician, and he could have knowledge of history because he's been around the world, but he just doesn't have the best way of communicating that sometimes. And so therefore, he wasn't an idiot. Far from it. He was quite put together, but he just didn't have that tact when it came to social graces and it came to fine learning. A third way is make them slightly impaired. Fine line here, you don't want to be, role-playing disabilities in a very insensitive way. But back in the days when people just didn't really think ahead of what they were saying, they used to call being mute dumb. So I actually did that for a character who, in, once again, the OSR Plus world, she had 0 smart. She had 6 depth, she was super agile, she was super wise, but she just didn't have a way to communicate with her group that she didn't really know that well. It was really fun for me because I got to actually, instead of be able to talk to my co-players in character, I had to sign, I had to point, or I had to use just basically mumbled words. It was just her whole backstory was that she had a thing on her that was prohibiting her from being too intelligent. It was basically like a collar of sorts. So that worked out really well in the sense that I would have to kind of lead by example and really just kind of put myself out there. So yeah, even though she was really, really, really wise, she was very misunderstood by the rest of the party, and they kind of treated her like a dum-dum. They treated her like she was some kind of moron. Goddamn maroon. From that, they more treated her like a child. So it did create a cool little friction within the group, and it was an interesting way to play 0 smart. And now finally, you can just lean into it. And by leaning into it, I mean embrace the lack of knowledge or unlearnedness, if that's even a word, with the character. And you can even do that by adding a flaw to it, which once again makes them more interesting, in my opinion at least. So I have this character in 5e named Kaz. He is a conquest paladin. He was a very super strong because he's focusing on his charisma. He's very charismatic. But we rolled and I didn't do so well on my rolls, and so he ended up with a 7 intelligence. And with that, I kind of played it in that he wasn't very religious. He's conquest paladin, so his gods weren't really that important to him. It was more his oath. And B, he definitely knew nothing about the arcane. He was very, very, very bad at that. And then, as far as investigation, I didn't want him to be horrible, so I put my proficiency in there. But the way I really leaned into his lack of intelligence is he was a racist. He, as a Dragonborn, hated humans. And although he always kept his cool in situations, he was extremely charismatic and had this great way of speaking and just had the silver tongue that could just cut through or intimidate if he needed to. But he always kept his cool unless he saw a human. So he just really leaned into it. And that adding that flaw made it so this very well-spoken and put together and this character just had a vision, and he knew what he wanted to become and how to become that. But every now and then he'd run into a human and it would just derail him, and he would get kind of lost, and he would not necessarily lose his cool, but he would get a little bit uppity. I think he held up a guy for a public spanking at one point. But just kind of lean into that, because what is dumber than a fucking bigot? So yeah, that's just basically another way. And you can take this to all other stats. I mean, you could have someone that is not charismatic, but still, maybe they make that persuasion roll and they get a nat 20. How did they do it? Maybe they fell and it was so cute and adorable that the person just they were disarmed and they couldn't help it. I play with a guy who plays a character named Lenny, who is a hick forest gnome, and he's just hilarious. But meanwhile, Lenny's trying to romance one of our NPCs that's been with us, and he's doing a great job. I mean, he's just been rolling like crazy. But when he does mess up, it's hilarious because he's not charismatic, and so like he'll accidentally like shit his pants. I'm like, oh, I shit my pants, or just he just this comes out, says the wrong thing, or just has this like really rubish kind of saying that he'll put out. But when he does pull it off, she's charmed by it. She doesn't know what to expect with him. It just he does the unexpected, and so you can still lean into these things all across the stat boards. To wrap up, how can you play your bonehead without boning it? Be obliviously smart. Let your companions connect the dots for you. Realize that there's more than one type of intelligence, and you don't have to be book smart. Give yourself something that impairs you. Once again, though, be compassionate with that. Don't be an asshole. It's really where you come from and how you do it that matters. And then finally, just lean into it and enjoy the flawed nature of them and really just push that through. So yeah, that's what I got for you today. I hope it helps. I hope it gets the gears turning. Tell me about your stupid characters and how you pulled them off in the comments. Like the bell, subscribe a button, I don't know. Just know that tabletop RPGs rock. Hell yeah. Fuck yeah. So dumb.